Welcome to today's Explainer. Let me ask you a question right off the bat, especially to all the 8th graders out there joining us today. When you look out your window at the trees, the sky, the weather, do you see yourself as just a passive observer of the Earth, or do you see yourself as an active caretaker? Well, today's Explainer breaks down a lesson that's designed to completely change how you view your relationship with our planet. We're looking at the exact intersection where our everyday human actions crash right into the global climate. We've got a ton of fascinating, really important ground to cover today, exploring how to actually make a positive change in the world. So let's get into it. Okay, let's dive right into our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the call to stewardship. Then we'll break down the science of the greenhouse gas effect, followed by human activities and emissions. After that, we'll look at steps to reduce emissions. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with education powered by morality. All right, Section 1, the call to stewardship. So before we even touch a thermometer or look at a factory, this lesson establishes a really strong foundational starting point. Psalm 24, verse 1 reads, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it." The curriculum explains that when people truly internalize this, that the earth isn't just some random rock we happen to live on, but a deliberate creation belonging to the Creator, well, their whole perspective completely shifts. It totally reframes the environment as something precious, something specifically entrusted to humanity. And that brings us to this idea of stewardship. Basically, it means being an active caretaker of creation rather than just a passive observer. The lesson points out that in the Christian faith, believers have an assigned duty to manage and protect creation. You know, they don't just sit on the sidelines and watch the world go by. When a problem pops up, the call is to actively step in. I want you to keep that specific role of caretaker in the back of your mind as we transition into the actual mechanics of what's happening to our Earth right now. Let's move to Section 2 and see how this builds into the greenhouse gas effect. To be a good steward, you really have to understand the science of what you're actually stewarding, right? And the science here relies on a pretty simple 3-step process. First, gases naturally trap heat in the atmosphere. That's actually essential for keeping the planet warm enough for life to exist. But second, human actions are adding extra gases. And third, that leads directly to the Earth overheating. Think of greenhouse gases literally like blankets on your bed. On a chilly night, 1 or 2 blankets are perfect, right? They trap your body heat, they keep you cozy. But what happens if someone comes into your room and throws 10 extra heavy blankets on top of you? You're going to get sweaty. You're going to overheat. And well, right now, our Earth is wearing way too many blankets. So we have this really stark contrast between natural balance and modern disruption. The lesson teaches that God designed the Earth with a perfect natural balance of greenhouse gases, things like carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, just to keep our world livable. But modern human activities have massively increased the concentration of these gases. We are completely disrupting that delicate balance. And this modern disruption, it's exactly what is causing the planet to overheat and drastically changing our weather patterns. And look, this isn't just some abstract scientific concept floating up in the sky. This overheating has real, tangible, physical stakes that are putting communities at risk all over the globe. Because we're trapping too much heat. We are actually seeing stronger, much more destructive storms. We're witnessing the rapid melting of massive glaciers. And we're watching entire ecosystems change, which makes it harder for animals to survive, and honestly, harder for people to grow food. The physical stakes of wearing too many of these atmospheric blankets are just incredibly high. Which brings us to Section 3, human activities and emissions. Okay, so we know what the problem is, right? Too many extra blankets trapping heat. Now we have to ask the obvious question, where exactly are we getting these extra blankets from? Well, the big 3 culprits for human emissions are transportation, power plants, and agriculture. The lesson points out that when fossil fuels are burned or unsustainable industries are supported, it directly feeds this greenhouse gas problem. Let's break these down a bit so you can see exactly how everyday modern life plugs right into this massive global issue. Consider this staggering number for a second, 4. That is the number of metric tons of carbon dioxide, or CO2, that a typical gasoline-powered car releases into the air every single year. 4 metric tons from just one car. When you stop and think about the millions upon millions of gas cars driving on the roads, the airplanes flying overhead, and the trucks moving goods around every single day, you can suddenly picture exactly how fast we are pumping that heavy CO2 blanket right into the atmosphere. But hey, it's not just cars. Coal-fired power plants are actually among the absolute largest sources of greenhouse gases globally. When coal is burned to generate the electricity that, powers our homes and schools, massive clouds of carbon dioxide get sent into the air. And then there's agriculture. This one surprises a lot of people, but cattle actually produce methane as part of their natural digestion process. And methane is an incredibly potent heat-trapping gas. Plus, the fertilizers used in farming release nitrous oxide. So between transportation, electricity generation, and our food production, those layers of blankets are just constantly building up. All right, let's pivot to Section 4, Steps to Reduce Emissions. I know the global problem can sound a little scary, but the lesson pivots here to some really empowering, localized solutions. Because remember, stewards are not passive observers. There are specific, actionable choices we can make to reduce this footprint. For example, instead of taking a gas car for a super short trip, what if you walk, bike, or use public transit? That immediately chips away at that 4 metric tons of CO2. And on a larger scale, communities can support transitioning our power grids away from coal and toward renewable energy like wind and solar, which produce zero emissions during use, by the way. And to help with that methane problem, individuals can choose to eat less red meat or support sustainable farming practices. And this brilliantly illustrates how scientists and citizens around the world are actually working together right now on these exact cleaner energy sources. So the lesson actually issues a direct challenge for its students, essentially a homework assignment. Evaluate your daily habits. It asks you to really consider how you can help reduce emissions based on what we've just learned about greenhouse gases. The curriculum challenges you to write down 1 or 2 real, practical ways to act as a faithful steward and lower your own footprint this week. And that leads us nicely into Section 5, Education Powered by Morality. The course brings this all back to one really powerful question. What is the point of being smart if we just make bad choices? The core philosophy of the Hero Smart Academy Godly Learner series is that intertwining biblical morality with education is completely non-negotiable. They argue that knowledge all by itself just isn't enough without a moral compass to guide it. Think about it. Being incredibly smart and understanding the exact molecular structure of greenhouse gases doesn't really help anyone if that education is followed up by selfish choices that end up hurting our communities and our planet. The ultimate promise of this lesson is found in Romans chapter 8, which promises peace of mind to everyone who keeps their minds spiritual. The text asserts that when high-level scientific education is paired with the spiritual morality of being a faithful steward, it actually yields a profound peace of mind. The whole idea is that you'll sleep better knowing you are living in harmony with your Creator's design and actively doing your part to care for the world. So, I want to leave you with this final, really provocative thought from the curriculum to carry with you today. How will you use your education to be a better steward of creation today? You are officially equipped with the scientific knowledge and the moral calling to be an active caretaker. The earth is waiting for leadership. Thank you so much for exploring this explainer with me today, and I'll catch you next time.